So as we look at what we're teaching today, and we're talking about the idea of marriage, we talked about in this series, and we're in week 3 of this series, that we want to present a biblical vision of it. So it's going to be brutally realistic, brutally realistic, but it's also going to be a glorious vision of what it is. We want to assist married people in correcting mistaken views that they might be having, how they're going to repair where they're headed, as well as help singles either stop over-desiring marriage, my life isn't complete unless I get married, or totally dismissing marriage. I need a man like I need a hole in the head. Neither of those are helpful. Neither of those are helpful. So part of this series, we'll go ahead next Sunday. We'll have a Q&A. Better idea is probably a Q&R, question and response time, talking about marriage. We'll meet right over here in C hallway. It's for anyone, single or married. We'll take anonymous questions. You'll have a card you can fill out, anonymous questions, and we'll just take time after the service. Sarah and I will be there. So like I said, question and answer, or if we don't have an answer, question and response from a biblical perspective about marriage. And we're also figuring this out still, but last Sunday in this series, which is probably the 14th or the 21st of November, finding some way to do some form of renewal of vows for those that might be interested in that. But in this series, we've been asking ourselves, do we want to line up with what Scripture says about marriage, or do we just want to go with cultural standards? By the way, if you go back 20 years ago, cultural standards are different today, or 40 years, or 60 years, or 80 years, and you can just keep going all the way back to the time of Jesus. The cultural standards are always going to shift. The truth we see in Scripture is for all people, all places, all times, all geographic locations, which is why it works whatever language is being spoken, or whatever culture it is. We talked last week about a definition of marriage. I'm sorry. I may have skipped that one. Yeah, there's the definition of marriage. A legal, public, permanent, and exclusive promise. We said if it scares you, you're reading it right. But if it also engages you, you're reading it right. Today, I want to focus just on one verse out of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. You've probably heard it said at nearly every wedding if it was done by an actual minister. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Old school version keeps the word leave in there, but instead of the word united, it uses what word? Anybody know? A man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave. Cleave. It's a unique word. The only time I remember it being used as a child is if we're talking about leave it to beaver. And then it was called the Cleaver family. A man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. If your marriage is strong and your life stinks, you can still move forward in strength. If you lose your job, but your marriage is strong, you can still move forward in strength. If you get a bad diagnosis from the doctor, but your marriage is strong, you can still move forward in strength. The power that a marriage brings. If you have a family death and your marriage is strong, you can still move forward in strength. If your marriage is weak and your circumstances are amazing, you will move forward in weakness. You didn't lose your job, you got a promotion, but your marriage is weak, there's not much celebrating going on. If you get a health scare and your marriage is weak, there's not a lot of support and strength. There's a lot of long, quiet nights in different rooms. If you have a death of a family member and your marriage is weak, you've got some awkward times, and it actually is probably a perfect time for the enemy to say, is it time to start a drinking habit? Because that would be a great time for the enemy to come in and say that. Have you noticed that we all understand the power of marriage, even if we're not married, or we're single again, or we're single and looking to be married? How do we know that? Because we're smart people, and two, we understand that when we see an engagement announcement, whether it's mailed to us, whether it's spread through the grapevine in our family, or whether we see an engagement announcement on social media, we immediately process it like that. We process it going, oh, that's going to be good for them, or, ooh, I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. Why do we do that? We know the power that a marriage relationship has. It's got the power to take you forward and bring you up. It's also got the power to drag you down just 2 steps ahead of hell, right? We've seen that happen in people's lives. We've totally seen that happen. Marriage has the power to change you. It should. If you got married and you didn't get changed, I'm not sure you got married. You may have got a roommate, but I don't know that you got married. It has the power to tear you down, it has the power to build you up. Your spouse, when you get married, you're giving the power they can totally reprogram your self-perception. Does that sound scary? It should. Does that sound possibly powerful? It should, because it is. Apart from our vertical relationship with God, is the most powerful relationship in our life, which is one of the reasons we're considering a vow renewal. It's a primary relationship in our life. So we're talking about the power and the priority of a marriage relationship. Whether that is your marriage relationship, your future marriage relationship, or the marriage relationships that happen to be in your life, and you're wondering, man, ever since he got married, he quit bowling with us on Thursday, playing volleyball with us on Tuesday, and playing poker with us on Monday. What is his problem? He doesn't have a problem. He's prioritizing his marriage because that's the most priority relationship in our life next to God. Therefore, the command, leave your mother and father, cleave, unite to your wife in such a way that you're one flesh and you can't even pull it apart, is totally different than what our culture says. Hook up, shack up, break up, repeat. Scriptural teaching is totally different. And it's been different since day one. And it's worked since day one. Do not hear what I did not say. I did not say it was easy. If anyone is telling you marriage is easy, they have no idea what they're talking about. And they're probably not married. And if they tell you, oh, I've been married 4 times, it's easy. There's your cue. There's your cue. The first human friendship, a husband and a wife. If you're in a marriage or considering to be in a marriage and you're not willing to say, this will be the most important person in my life, you're entering it wrong. And you're setting yourself up for pain for the rest of your life. The absolute most important person in my life, I'm choosing. And it doesn't matter. You see, I'm not married to the same woman that I used to be married to. You may not be aware of that. You may not know, Sarah and I got married twice. We got married on July 28, 1990, and then we got married 14 days later. We got married in Kansas, and my mom and dad came, and then we got married 2 weeks later in Avon, Ohio, and all my family came. In Kansas, they gave gifts. In Ohio, cash. Already had the woman, already had the ring, already had the dress, all the expensive stuff is taken care of, right? But you know what? I'm still not married to the same woman because after 3 years, she wasn't the same person anymore, neither was I. And after 6 years, we weren't the same. And after 10 years, we weren't the same. And then 20 years and 30 years, and we continued to change. And it still is requiring a choice. That day I chose not to marry every other woman in the world when I chose to marry her. And every year, the choice continues because she's not the same person she was. And I'm really, really glad that I'm not the same person that I was. So first thing in your notes, if you're following along today, what priority does my future marriage or my current marriage have right now? Right now. What priority does it have? Are you single and you're seeking and considering to get married? By the way, pro tip, mouthwashes in the bathrooms down by the sanctuary. But if you're single and seeking to get married, how are you prioritizing a future marriage right now? I'm waiting until I find the right one. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Let me see if I can do this physically. This is you. The person you're looking for, oh man, that's the person I'm looking for, is looking for someone that's prioritizing them before they met them. The person you want in your life wants to know that you've been prioritizing them for years. How you've been handling your debt and finances. How you've been moving forward in your education and career. How you've been handling your health. If you're going to say, well, I'm going to get in shape once I meet the right person. I'm going to quit running up credit card debt when I meet the right person. I'm going to quit watching TV 10 hours a day when I meet the right person. The person you're looking for isn't looking for someone like that. You start now as a single, prioritizing your marriage. That when you do find a person, you're going, I think this might be the person. You don't have the conversation that says, yeah, I'm $20,000 in credit card debt because I really like expensive pizza. Her father may roll his eyes at that one. But if you can say, I've been preparing for you ever before I ever met you. If you believe that God's leading you toward marriage, you start now preparing that. We understand that marriage is the main emphasis on a wedding day, right? On a wedding day, it's easy to see. Look how we prioritize. Look how much time we spent on the wedding. Look how much money we spent on the wedding. Look at how much family we invited to the wedding. Post-wedding day, there's a lot of things that are going to try and take this marriage that you put on the pedestal and put at the top. There's a lot of things going to try and push it over. There's a lot of things that are going to come by and say, that needs to be the second most important, that needs to be the third most important relationship. That can wait until you're married 15, 20, 30 years. This is more important. Right? You need to make sure you get more money right now. You need to get a better education. You need to focus on this right now. Now, some of the things will be straight from hell that will try and tear your marriage apart. But most of them are not. Most of them are really good things that will try and take priority over your marriage. Most of them are things that as a single you relied on for life, for sanity, for social, physical, emotional, mental, psychological health. But as a married person, they can't have the same place they had if you're going to be a married person. Now, if you want to do what you want to do when you want to do it, stay single and get a dog and eat ice cream. If you want the privileges that come with marriage, and that's not just the intimacy, if you want someone that can look to the heart of you and know you better than you know yourself, and you want to be known and loved in that way, like everything, it comes with responsibilities, not just privileges. So if you're single and seeking marriage, we're going to start talking about some spouse substitutes here, things that we need to leave if we're going to cleave. These spouse substitutes are not bad things. They're good things. But for a married person, they can't have a really high importance anymore. They can't be the highest anymore. And they probably need to be revisited in your marriage probably every 5 or 10 years, if not more often. Now, if you're single and you're a healthy person, you probably use these things like crazy to keep your life going. But if you're going to get married, your interaction with those will have to change. Many people have destroyed marriages by not properly leaving. Therefore, they never cleaved. Here's your cheesy, crazy rhyming point. Are you ready? The key to cleave is leave. Isn't that cheesy? Isn't it just stupid? But if you remember it, the key to the uniting together, one flesh, the key to cleave is you have to be able to leave. If you don't successfully leave, you will struggle to cleave. The scripture's really plain on what the first one is. That's parents. That's parents. Western society, the Western hemisphere, if you look at one of those world maps that's flat, it's everything on the left, de-emphasizes obligation to parents. We celebrate as a nation independence. Scripture challenges us to interdependence, but if you go to an Asian culture, they're actually shocked by how quickly we distance ourselves from our parents. Because when you think about it, your relationship with your parents is extremely profound and impactful. And if you're still in your 20s or 30s, give yourself a little more time. You'll grasp that even more as you get older. But what could be a more profound relationship than the people who gave you birth? I'll tell you what can be: marriage. Your marriage has to be a higher priority with you than your relationships if you're in a marriage. Much more higher than your parents. Now, praise your parents. You wouldn't be alive without them, but let's not go back to that because that just freaks us out, right? Our parents did what? That's how we were conceived? Yeah, gouge your eyes out, right? But that's how it happened. Most parents, maybe you had some challenging parents, most parents made enormous sacrifices for your well-being. How did you survive age 2, age 3, age 4, age 5? If you don't believe in original sin and selfishness, serve in our 2-year-old nursery. You will be convinced in a heartbeat. Somehow, you survived it. Your parents are to thank for that. Yet that can't be the priority relationship in your life if you're married. Your marriage is the priority relationship. God didn't put a parent and a child in the Garden of Eden. No, he put a husband and a wife. Marriage supersedes all other relationships. Pastor, isn't there any give here? Leave your mother and father and cleave to your wife, and the two shall become one. I'm not sure what stronger language could have been used. And that's to a culture that almost worshiped the idea of your parents. The marriage relationship is priority. If it's not priority, you're going to struggle to become one flesh. One way we do that is financially. Financially, you have to leave your parents financially if you're going to cleave. If you're still financially dependent on your parents, it's going to be really hard to cleave. But I like a really nice house, and I want to have furniture like they did. It took them 25 years of marriage to get that furniture, and they didn't afford it, so they got you out of the house. I remember when we were walking our son through our house we live in now, and the house we live in right now is much larger and nicer than the house we lived in Kansas when we lived with him. And we walked him through it. We hadn't closed on it yet, so we're just walking him through it. And he looks through everything, 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath. We came from a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath house. And at the end of it, he goes, "You guys realize it's just the two of you, right?" So naturally, we told him, "You do realize this is also an investment, right?" If you can't afford to leave, it may not be time to cleave. You want to get married? Start saving financially. "I'm going to wait till I can afford to get married." You never will. You never will. You're just going to have to set your bar a little bit lower on what's considered proper housing and what's considered reliable transportation. If it starts, it probably qualifies. Can I get a witness on that? To leave your parents, you have to emotionally leave. You have to emotionally leave your parents if you're going to cleave. If you cannot make a decision without the input of your parents, nothing wrong with getting your parents' input, but your parents' input cannot trump your spouse's if you're married. And if you're getting ready to consider marrying someone that you don't trust their wisdom, you probably shouldn't marry them. That probably should be a dead ringer sign that this is not a good decision. The person you're supposed to be naked with physically, your spouse, the person you're supposed to be naked with emotionally, naked verbally, naked financially, how would you feel if they went ahead and shared everything in your relationship to their parents after you're married? And then they came to you and said, "Well, hey, I was talking to mom and dad, and they think we should do this." That's not how a marriage works. It can't work that way. You're not cleaving if you're not leaving. You need to leave your parents psychologically if you're going to cleave to one another. I don't know how you were raised, what your family pattern was. Each of us come from a different family pattern for sure. We have to leave that behind and start a new one if we're getting married. If you rigidly impose how you were raised, whatever way that was. We're in church every time the doors are open, or we're in church Christmas and Easter, and that's it. If you rigidly impose it as opposed to working with your spouse on what your family will do, you haven't left your parents. You're just still doing exactly what they did. The only way that could work is if you married your sister, and don't do that. You're not from Arkansas. If anyone is watching from Arkansas online, that was a joke. We were just kidding. Sometimes we don't leave our parents because we copy them totally and not get the input of our spouse. Sometimes we don't leave our parents because we go opposite on them so much because we hated everything about our childhood and we refused to do anything they did. If you're still being motivated, but not by adulation of your parents, but you're being motivated by anger for your parents, you still haven't left them. You're not being motivated by truth and wisdom and knowledge. You're being motivated by anger and angst and almost revenge. I'm not there yet as an in-law, but we believe by God's grace someday we will be. But mother-in-laws, you have a great desire to protect. And chances are your wisdom for your newly married adult child and this person that married your adult child is spot on and awesome and sorely needed. But is it possible you're sabotaging your adult child's marriage by too much value-added conversation? Is it possible? Yeah, but the curtains are horrible. Yeah, but no one's saying you're wrong. Are you helping? Father-in-law, are you weakening the foundation of your adult child's marriage by rescuing too quick financially? Because they need your help, and it feels good to be needed, doesn't it? Oh, it does. I would have liked them to come, my parents, to help me back then. Maybe you would have, or maybe it would have undermined the two becoming one, because we always relied on daddy or daddy-in-law's wallet and pocketbook. We're not saying parents can't help out. Not at all. But both spouses, your adult child who's married and their spouse, need to be in full agreement privately, without any coercion. And even if they make a wrong decision, as long as it's not going to end up with some of them having to hire a lawyer, they may need to learn their own way. When an adult child gets married, as a parent, you are now part of their family of origin. They've started a new family. Some of you are dreading that when it happens to your child, but some of you are rethinking your first 5 years of marriage. You started a new family the day you walked out. On July 28, 1990, Sarah Roadcap became more my wife than Dale and Junadell Roadcap's daughter. And that needed to continue to move forward in that direction. So here's the question under this point. Has my spouse role dethroned my role as a child? Has it dethroned it? Am I fully more my spouse's spouse than I am my parent's child? I don't have a clock on the back wall, so I probably can just go till 1. Is that right? Sounds good. If you're single and seeking and considering marriage, be aware of the challenge that awaits you if you're going to cleave. You'll have to leave. Let's move a little quicker here. The next one is children. Children are a common spouse substitute. We have an easy temptation when it comes to kids. They're so cute and cuddly. They need us so much. We love to be needed. Part of that is humanity. If we're not careful, part of that is pride. But we love to be needed. Love your kids first, your family will suffer. Leave and cleave. A man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his children. Some do. A woman shall leave her father and mother and cleave to her children. You ever hug? Don't raise your hand at this. You ever hug your child to get physical comfort you weren't getting from your spouse? Have you ever used a child as a spousal avoidance device? Nearly every parent has at some point. Crud, some of us use our dogs, right? If you prioritize your children instead of your spouse, your marriage will be weak, and your children will know it. And then they will be weaker because of it. When children know, and some of you knew when your parents' marriage was weak and when it was strong, when children know their parents' marriage is strong, what a safety net. What can you do when you know there's a safety net? Let's try the trapeze. Let's go flying through the air. I got a safety net. When children know their parents' marriage is weak, every step is questionable. And putting those expectations on a child to fulfill what a spouse is required to do is unhealthy for the child. Then that child's going to grow up and leave, right? And then if they get married, it's a great opportunity to resent the person who stole your child. A family-centered family. So the question here is, do I use my children as a spouse substitute? The best thing for your children is for you to love God. And the second best thing for your children is for you to love your spouse, and may your children know that God is first, and may your children know that your spouse is second, and that they are not first or second. Let them see that God is first and your spouse is second. Let them hear it, let them know with it, and let them deal with the fact that God is first and your spouse is second. Frequently when our son would come into the room, if I was in a conversation, I'm sorry, son, I'm sorry, Connor, I can't talk to you right now. I'm talking to I'm talking to your mother right now. You'll have to wait. He got the hint eventually. We wanted to prioritize and model for him. This relationship has priority. You are hyper important in our lives. If you don't believe it, let me show you how much money I spend to keep you around. But you're not more important than the spouse. You are not. You are not. I'm going to speak on this not because of any knowledge, but if you're a single parent, oh, how hard it would be to re-enter a marriage. I can't even imagine or fathom. You've had to fulfill both roles as half a team. Can't even begin to understand what that's like. I'm not going to pretend to. I can give sympathy, but I can't give empathy. I have no idea. And then for you to re-enter a marriage and put your spouse first and not put your children first, which is still what Scripture requires. Yeah. Your vetting process for a future spouse might be a little longer, right? It's not just how do they treat you, it's how do they treat your children. But even if it's a step husband, is that a word? I don't know if it's a word or not. Even if it's their stepdad, they need to see, how will they know what to want and desire in a marriage if they don't see it modeled? They need to see it modeled. This last point we'll go through quickly. It's the catch-all, other. I hope you have a career. I hope you have something that you do. Maybe your career is maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you are culturally appropriating Homo sapiens for maximum kingdom effectiveness. It's still a career. But you can't have a career and a marriage both be number one priority. Someday, God may lead you to take a job that pays you less so your marriage can have a higher priority. Prioritize the marriage. I've had people talk to me and say, Pastor, I love this church. I love your preaching, but my spouse doesn't, and they want to go to another church. I don't have to pray. Stay with your spouse. Stay with your spouse. Go. Go. You need to be worshiping with your spouse, if at all possible. Just go. As long as you're not, joining some cult or something. But it just happens to be different. It meets differently. Whatever the reason, stay with your spouse. Prioritize the spouse. The relationships, friendships, recreations, hobbies. Generally, a husband cannot fulfill all of his wife's social and verbal needs. Can I get an amen on that, ladies? Okay. So she needs some girl time. Generally, a wife cannot satisfy all of her husband's desire for recreational companionship. There's only so much that a husband can handle face-to-face communication, and there's only so much that a wife wants to put up with shoulder-to-shoulder communication that guys like. So there's definitely room in a marriage for that. But if you have friends you enjoy more than your spouse, that should be a warning sign. That should be this shouldn't go much farther. Some of you know I'm a runner. I run marathons. My wife runs as well. She runs from a fire and to a sail. Her words, not mine, her words. My running hobby cannot replace the priority of my marital relationship. My running hobby cannot supersede that. But when I'm training for a marathon, my running hobby takes a lot of time. If it was a burr in her saddle, if it was something that was causing friction, it would have to go. I don't know what you think of what I'm wearing today, but I honestly don't care what you think. My wife approves of it. I don't know or care if you like my beard. She approves of it. If she didn't, it would be gone tomorrow. The husband's body belongs to the wife. The wife's body belongs to the husband. If I wanted to wear something that she thought made me look like a dork, I would not have the privilege to wear it. If you see me walking around like a dork, you can be sure my wife is out of town. If someone of the opposite gender becomes a better companion to you than your spouse, that's emotional adultery. If your pastor offends you here a little bit, let him, because if your pastor never offends you, you don't really have a pastor. If that person's that person's a better companion to you than your spouse, it's emotional adultery. It's intimacy without sexual activity. It's still unfaithful. If there are online chat records or there are phone records you would not want your spouse to see, even a liberal, promiscuous college student will call that cheating. The priority relationship is marriage. So if you're married, have my priorities changed since marriage? Am I embracing that or resenting that? If you're considering marriage, you probably have some priorities that all the stuff I just talked about, you're going, those things are some of the most important things in my life. They should be. That's great. If you're going to enter a marriage, those priorities have to change. 2, will leave their parents and leave so they can cleave. If you do not cleave, man, you're going to be out of sync and out of tune until you're finally out of each other's lives. I don't want to see that. When God is not first in our life, it's called idolatry. We think idolatry is, I'm bowing to Buddha, I'm bowing. Yes, that's idolatry as well. But if we put anything in first place besides God, that's idolatry. When your spouse isn't your priority relationship, that's adultery. Even if you're keeping your clothes on. Because if something else is first place, eventually those clothes are probably going to come off. I'm not saying a single thing today that's easy. Every bit of this goes back to what we talked about. Self-centeredness is the main enemy in any marriage. Submission is the main foundation to any marriage. First, we submit to God. And then we submit to our spouse and to each other. That's a lot of submitting, Pastor. If you want to do what you want, when you want, how you want, stay single, get a dog, eat ice cream. You can do that. But if that's not where you sense God leading you, make the commitment. Be willing to dive in and realize that as you humble yourself, He lifts you up. Stand with me, would you? Go ahead and lead us, friend. Across this place, can we humble our hearts? Can we lift our hands? Resurrect things in us today, Lord. In dead marriages, resurrect hope.
Your name is victory.